The first ship appeared in Earth's sky on a Tuesday morning. It was massive, blocking out the sun over major cities like a dark hand covering the light. Stood on the observation deck of the Korean military base, watching the alien vessel hover silently above Seoul. He was a commander, young for his rank at 32, with sharp eyes that missed nothing. Around him, officers shouted into phones and typed frantically on computers. No one knew what to do. "Sir, they're broadcasting a message," said from her station. She was the best communications officer in the facility, able to decode signals faster than anyone else. Her hands shook slightly as she pressed the speaker button. The voice that came through was cold and mechanical. "Humans of Earth, you will surrender your planet within one solar rotation. Resistance will result in total elimination. This is your only warning." Looked at, her face had gone pale. "How many ships?" he asked. 73, she whispered. "They're positioning themselves over every major population center on the planet." The next 24 hours were chaos. World leaders tried to negotiate. They sent messages in every language. They offered peace, trade, cooperation. They did not respond. Admiral, the highest-ranking military officer in the combined Earth Defense Fleet, ordered all available ships to launch. It was humanity's first and last organized resistance. Watched the battle through satellite feeds. Its fleet consisted of 200 ships, the product of decades of international cooperation and technological advancement. Humanity was proud of those ships. They represented the best engineering minds working together. They destroyed them in 11 minutes. The alien weapons were beyond anything humans had imagined. Beams of purple energy sliced through hulls like they were paper. Its flagship exploded in a ball of fire visible from the ground. One by one, every human ship became debris floating in orbit. Not a single vessel took damage. "Get everyone into the bunker," ordered. His voice was steady, but his heart hammered in his chest. "Now." The bombardment began exactly 24 hours after their first message. Was deep underground when the first strike hit Seoul. The entire bunker shook like an earthquake. Lights flickered. Someone screamed. The displays on the wall showed camera feeds from the surface, but one by one they went dark. Sat at her emergency console, tears streaming down her face as she tried to maintain contact with other facilities. "Beijing is gone," she said, her voice breaking. "Moscow gone, New York, London, Tokyo. All gone, they're hitting everything." For 72 hours, the methodically destroyed Earth's surface. They targeted cities first, then military bases, then industrial centers. They burned forests and boiled oceans in certain areas. The attacks were efficient and thorough. When they were done, 90% of humanity was dead. Stood in the command center looking at a map of the world. Most of it was red now, indicating total destruction. Small pockets of green remained, places where bunkers and underground facilities had survived. He counted them. 12 major facilities, maybe 40 smaller ones, 10 million people at most. Out of 8 billion. "They're leaving," announced. Her voice was hollow, empty of emotion. She had cried herself dry over the past 3 days. "The fleet is departing Earth orbit. They're leaving a garrison on the moon, but the main force is moving on." Felt something cold settle in his chest. "They think we're finished." "We are finished," someone said from the back of the room. It was one of the facility's engineers. He was young, maybe 25, and looked like he hadn't slept since the attacks began. "Look at the radiation levels on the surface. Look at the atmospheric composition. Earth is a dead planet now." "Then we survive underground," said firmly. "We adapt." "To what end?" asked. His voice rose with desperation. "So we can hide in holes for the rest of our lives. So we can watch our children grow up never seeing the sun." Walked over to the young engineer. He put a hand on his shoulder. "No," he said quietly. "So we can make sure this never happens again, to anyone." A message came through on the alien frequency. Played it over the speakers. The voice was the same cold, mechanical tone. Your species showed promise but lacked the strength to endure. Consider this mercy. Your suffering was brief. We have classified your world as lifeless. No further action will be taken." The transmission ended. In the silence that followed, looked around at the surviving officers and civilians in the bunker. He saw grief, shock, and despair on every face. But he also saw something else. Anger. A burning, quiet rage that seemed to fill the room like smoke. "They called this mercy," said. Everyone turned to look at him. "They think they've destroyed us. They think we're extinct." "We might as well be," someone muttered. "No," said, his voice growing stronger. 10 million humans are still alive. We have bunkers, supplies, technology. We have knowledge. Every book, every piece of data, every scientific discovery humanity ever made is stored in facilities like this one around the world. He walked to the central console and brought up a schematic. "We also have this. The left a garrison on our moon. That means equipment, ships, weapons, technology we can study." Looked up at him with red-rimmed eyes. "You want to fight back?" "Eventually," said. "First we survive, we stabilize, we learn. They think we're dead, which means they won't be watching us. That's our advantage." Stared at the commander for a long moment, then slowly nodded. "I can work with that. The lunar garrison is abandoned most of the time according to the scans. If we could get a small team up there." "One step at a time," said, but something had changed in the room. The despair was still there, but now it had direction, purpose. Over the next few weeks, established contact with other survivor groups. A doctor named ran a medical facility under what used to be Singapore. A weapons specialist named commanded a military bunker in the former United States. A scientist named led a research station beneath the Arctic ice. Slowly, carefully, they built a network. They called it the Remnant. 3 months after the bombardment, stood in front of a screen showing representatives from all 12 major facilities. 52 smaller groups were also connected to the call. 10 million faces looked to him for leadership, for hope, for a reason to keep living. "They devastated our world," he said. "They killed our families, burned our cities, and left us for dead. They did this casually, easily, like we were insects beneath their notice." He paused, letting his words sink in. "They made a mistake. They assumed that breaking us was the same as destroying us. They assumed we would give up and die quietly in the dark. They were wrong." His eyes burned with intensity. "We are humanity. We survived ice ages and plagues. We split the atom and touched the stars. We have fought and bled and built civilizations from nothing. And now, in our darkest hour, we will do what we do best." He leaned forward. "We will survive. We will adapt. We will learn. And one day, when we're ready, we will show the exactly what happens when you devastate humanity and assume we'll stay down." Across the globe, in dark bunkers and hidden facilities, 10 million humans listened to his words. And in their hearts, something that had nearly died in the bombardment began to burn again. Hope mixed with rage, the most dangerous combination in the universe. 2 years had passed since the sky burned. Stood in front of a device that should not exist, wiping sweat from his forehead. The machine hummed with alien energy, creating a bubble of clean air in a room that should have been flooded with deadly radiation. Around him, other engineers took measurements and made notes. "It works," one of them said, voice filled with wonder. "We actually got it working." Nodded, too tired to smile. For 18 months, he had led a team trying to understand technology. They had salvaged pieces from the abandoned garrison on the moon, sneaking up in small shuttles during what they learned were the aliens' shift changes. Each trip was dangerous. Each piece of technology was precious. This radiation shield was their first major breakthrough. It used principles human science barely understood, but his team had reverse-engineered it anyway. Now they could expand the safe zones in their bunkers. They could start reclaiming the surface, bit by bit. In another facility, doctor examined a patient under bright lights. The young woman on the table had been exposed to radiation during a surface expedition. 2 years ago, she would have died within weeks. Now, injected her with a treatment that combined human medicine with compounds extracted from medical supplies. The fever should break by morning, told the woman's family. She'll need to rest for a week, but she'll recover fully. After they left, sat down heavily in her chair. She was 43 years old and felt twice that. Every day brought new medical challenges: radiation sickness, psychological trauma, mutations from exposure. But every day, her team learned more. They adapted human treatments, mixed them with alien technology, and saved lives that should have been lost. In the command center, studied a star map with beside him. She had become more than just a communications officer. Over 2 years, she had learned to intercept and decode transmissions. The aliens used quantum encryption that human computers couldn't break, but had found patterns anyway. She was brilliant in a way that made grateful she was on humanity's side. "Listen to this," said, playing a recorded transmission. The language sounded like grinding metal, but the computer provided translation. "Fleet Command, this is Battle Group 7. We are redirecting to the outer reach. They have broken through our defensive line, requesting immediate reinforcement." Leaned forward, another alien species explained. "From what I've gathered, they're even more powerful than the two empires have been at war for decades. That's why they were so brutal with Earth. They needed a quick victory so they could redirect forces." "So they're stretched thin," said slowly, "fighting on multiple fronts." "Very thin," confirmed. "I've intercepted dozens of distress calls. They are losing systems. They're pulling back fleets from garrison duties to reinforce critical positions." Felt something stir in his chest. Not quite hope, but close. That means the moon garrison is probably undermanned. "More than that," said, pulling up another file. 3 months ago, they pulled half the garrison back to the core worlds. Right now, there might be as few as 50 soldiers on our moon. Over the next few months, the remnant grew stronger. What had been a desperate struggle for survival became something more organized. Engineers built new facilities using hybrid technology. Doctors kept people healthy. And throughout it all, coordinated everything, turning scattered survivors into a unified force. Called in from her facility with news that changed everything. She was a weapons specialist who had spent the past 2 years studying arms. "Commander, you need to see this," she said over the video link. Her eyes shone with excitement. On the screen, she held up what looked like a plasma rifle. "I've been analyzing their weapons for months. The technology is advanced, yes, but it's not magical, and in some ways it's actually inferior to human designs." "Explain," said. Grinned. "They have been the dominant power for so long they've stopped innovating. Their weapons are powerful but inefficient. They use 3 times more energy than they need to, and their targeting systems are designed for their biology, not ours. But here's the interesting part." She set down the alien weapon and picked up something else. It looked like a human assault rifle, but modified with glowing components. "I took a standard human rifle and integrated a power cell. Then I redesigned the firing mechanism using their energy principles but our engineering. The result? A weapon that hits harder than theirs, uses less energy, and is more accurate in human hands." Stared at the hybrid weapon. "How many can you make?" "With the resources we have, maybe 100 in the next 6 months. But Commander, this is just the beginning. If we can do this with rifles, imagine what we can do with ships, with armor, with everything." That night couldn't sleep. He walked through the bunker's corridors looking at the people who had survived. Children played in the common areas, their laughter echoing off metal walls. Scientists worked in laboratories, pushing the boundaries of what was possible. Soldiers trained in gyms, preparing for battles that might never come. They were alive. Against all odds, humanity had stabilized. His voice came over his communicator. "Commander, are you awake? I need to show you something." Made his way to the science section, where waited in her laboratory. She was younger than most of the senior staff, only 28, but her mind worked in ways that left others struggling to keep up. On her screen was a complex diagram of what looked like an engine. "The FTL drive," she said without preamble. "I've been studying the data we pulled from the lunar garrison. I think I understand how it works." Felt his heart rate increase. "You cracked faster than light travel." "Better," said, her fingers flying across the keyboard. "I didn't just crack it. I improved it. The drive works by creating a bubble that pushes space-time. It's elegant but slow to recharge. Jumping from system to system takes hours between charges. But if we modify the containment field and increase the power flow using human superconductor technology, we can cut that recharge time in half. Which means human ships, if we ever build them, could jump twice as fast as ships. We could outmaneuver them across the galaxy." Looked at the young scientist with new respect. "How long to build a prototype?" "Years," admitted. "We'd need to construct a shipyard, gather materials, train workers, but it's possible. For the first time since the bombardment, leaving Earth is actually possible." The months turned into a year, then another. 5 years after the devastation, the remnant had transformed from survivors into something else, something dangerous. In a hidden facility carved into an asteroid, the first human starship in the post-invasion era took shape. It was small, barely large enough for a crew of 20, but every centimeter of it represented innovation born from desperation. Human engineering combined with technology, improved and refined. A pilot who had survived the initial bombardment stood in the hangar looking up at the ship. He was young, barely 23, but he had a gift for flying that made experienced instructors shake their heads in amazement. Had chosen him personally to lead the first test flight. "She's beautiful," said softly. "She's dangerous," corrected, standing beside him. "The systems are experimental. The drive could malfunction. The weapons are untested in space combat." "So what you're saying is she's perfect for humanity's first real strike back," grinned. Gathered his senior staff for a meeting. He and a dozen others sat around the table. They looked different than they had 5 years ago. Harder, more focused. They had survived the unsurvivable and come out stronger. "The think we're extinct," began. "That's the only advantage we have, so we're going to use it. Small strikes, hit their supply lines, destroy their outposts, make them bleed without ever letting them see what's cutting them." "Operation Phantom," said, understanding immediately. "Exactly. We become ghosts, legends. They'll chalk up our attacks to the or pirates or equipment failure. By the time they realize humans are still alive, we'll be strong enough that it won't matter." Around the table, heads nodded. They understood the risk. They also understood the necessity. "We lost everything," said quietly. "Our world, our families, our future. They took it all in 3 days and called it mercy. Now we show them what mercy really means. We give them the chance to surrender when we're strong enough, which is more than they gave us." In the darkness of space, the first human strike team launched toward a supply depot, piloted the ship with steady hands. Behind him sat 9 soldiers carrying hybrid weapons. The ember that had nearly died 5 years ago was burning brighter now, and soon they would feel its heat. The supply depot, designated as Outpost 447, hung in the darkness between stars, a small station that processed fuel for passing military convoys. It held a crew of 30 aliens and enough fuel to power a battle fleet for months. They considered it safe, located deep in their territory where no enemy would dare venture. They were wrong. Brought his ship in slowly, using the debris field around the station as cover. His hands moved across the controls with practiced ease, making tiny adjustments that kept them invisible to the station's sensors. Beside him, his co-pilot monitored their energy signature. "We're reading as background radiation," she whispered, though there was no reason to be quiet in the vacuum of space. Behind them, 9 soldiers checked their weapons one last time. These were hybrid rifles designed by human engineering merged with power cells. They had trained for months for this single mission. Every soldier knew exactly what to do. The ship attached to the station's docking port with barely a whisper of sound. Cutting through the airlock took 3 minutes. Then they were inside, moving through corridors that smelled of ozone and something bitter that none of the humans recognized. The attack lasted 8 minutes. The Never had time to send a distress signal. The humans moved like ghosts, using tactics learned from centuries of warfare. They attacked from multiple directions, used the station's own structure for cover, and showed no mercy. When it was over, 30 aliens lay dead and the fuel reserves were rigged to explode. Waited at the docking port watching his team return. They moved quickly, professionally. No one spoke. They boarded the ship, sealed the airlock, and detached. As they jumped away into faster-than-light travel, the station exploded behind them in a ball of purple fire. "First blood," someone said softly in the cargo bay. In the command center back on Earth monitored communications. She heard the confusion in their voices when failed to check in. Search teams were dispatched. They found debris and bodies but no explanation. The fuel reserves had vaporized completely, suggesting an internal explosion. An accident. Listened to the recordings and allowed himself a small smile. "Next target." Replied, "A small garrison on the edge of space, 20 soldiers, minimal defenses." The strikes continued, one every few weeks, carefully spaced so they wouldn't see a pattern. Supply depots went dark. Small outposts exploded. Convoy ships vanished without trace. Each time the humans left no witnesses and no evidence. The High Command received reports but dismissed them as the chaos of war. They were fighting on multiple fronts. Equipment malfunctions and pirate raids were expected in such times. The possibility that humanity still existed never crossed their minds. Dead species didn't launch coordinated attacks across 3 sectors. In hidden facilities across the solar system, the remnant grew stronger. Supervised the construction of new ships in orbital shipyards that hung cloaked in space. They built slowly, carefully, using materials mined from asteroids. Each ship was better than the last, incorporating lessons learned from captured technology and human innovation. Worked 20-hour days perfecting the human FTL drive. Her modified design was faster than the version and more efficient. It used human superconductors to contain the spacetime bubble, allowing rapid recharges between jumps. A human ship could now make 3 jumps in the time a ship made 1. "We need to weaponize this," said during a strategy meeting. She stood at a holographic display showing ship schematics. "If our ships can jump faster, we can use it tactically. Jump in, strike, jump out before they can respond. Hit and run on a galactic scale," said, understanding immediately. Had become something of a legend among the pilots. He led every major strike mission, his skill and daring keeping casualties low. Under his leadership, the human strike teams hadn't lost a single person in 2 years of operations. He flew like he could see the future, making impossible maneuvers that left other pilots shaking their heads. "You're going to get yourself killed," his co-pilot told him after one particularly risky mission. Shrugged, "We all die eventually, might as well make it count." But he wasn't reckless. Every maneuver was calculated. Every risk was measured. He simply understood that in war, the side willing to take calculated risks usually won. The flew conservatively, protecting their superior technology. Humans flew aggressively, using speed and surprise to compensate for inferior numbers. In a facility beneath the Arctic ice, worked on something that would change the nature of the war. She was a cryptographer, one of the best humanity had ever produced. For 3 years, she had studied communication systems. Now, she was ready to move beyond just listening. "I can do more than decode their messages," she told during a secure video call. I can inject false data into their networks, make them see things that aren't there, send their ships to the wrong locations, turn their own systems against them." A virus asked. "A ghost in their machine," corrected. "Something that lives in their network, learning and adapting. They'll think it's equipment failure at first. By the time they realize it's an attack, it'll be too deeply embedded to remove." She demonstrated by hacking into a listening post at the edge of their territory. The station's sensors suddenly reported a massive fleet approaching. Panic filled the alien communications as they scrambled to respond to a threat that didn't exist. 3 hours later, when they realized the error, they blamed faulty sensors. Beautiful, breathed, watching the chaos unfold. The virus spread through networks slowly, carefully. It reported false supply levels, causing shortages. It delayed orders by hours or days. It created phantom signals that sent ships on wild chases. Small things, individually meaningless, but added together, they created chaos throughout the empire. 5 years after Operation Phantom began, the Remnant had 30 operational warships. They weren't massive vessels like the capital ships. They were smaller, faster, designed around human tactics. Each one could jump 3 times before needing to recharge. Each one carried weapons that merged human and technology. More importantly, each one had a crew that remembered Earth burning. Soldiers who had lost everything and spent 8 years preparing for revenge. They were hungry for blood, but disciplined enough to wait for the right moment. That moment came when intercepted a transmission about a battle fleet scheduled to pass through the Threshold Nebula. 12 capital ships and 40 escort vessels, carrying supplies to reinforce a critical front against the. "We're not ready for a direct engagement," one of its advisors argued. 30 ships against 52 will be slaughtered. "If we use conventional tactics, yes," agreed. "But we're not going to fight conventionally." He brought up a tactical display of the Threshold Nebula. It was a region of dense gas and radiation that interfered with sensors. The fleet would be partially blind passing through it, and in that blindness, humanity would strike. The plan was audacious. Insane, some called it. The human fleet would hide in the nebula, powered down to minimal energy signatures. When the fleet entered, they would attack from all sides simultaneously. Not a fair fight in open space, but an ambush in fog where superior numbers meant less. Would lead the fighter wings, smaller craft that could dart through the nebula's radiation without losing shields. They would target the escort vessels first, eliminating this defensive screen. Then the capital ships would be vulnerable to the larger human vessels. "It's going to be bloody," warned. "Even with every advantage, we're going to take casualties." "I know," said quietly. "But if we win, we'll prove something important. We'll prove that humanity can stand against the indirect combat. We'll prove we're more than ghosts and saboteurs. We're a threat." The human fleet assembled at a secret rally point beyond Neptune. 30 ships, 600 crew members, all volunteers. Every person aboard knew the odds, knew they might not come back. They came anyway. Broadcast a message to the entire fleet before they jumped to the Threshold Nebula. 8 years ago, they devastated our world. They killed billions. They left us for dead. They thought they had ended humanity's story, but they were wrong. We survived. We adapted. We learned. And now we're going to show them what it means to push humanity to the edge. He paused, looking at the camera with fierce determination. "Today we stop hiding. Today we stop running. Today we remind the galaxy that humanity doesn't break. We don't bow, we don't surrender, we fight. And we win." The fleet jumped toward the Threshold Nebula, leaving empty space behind. In the command center on Earth, tracked their progress on long-range sensors, stood by with medical teams on standby, monitored the ship's systems remotely, ready to assist if technical problems arose, and sat in his chair, watching the tactical display, knowing that in a few hours everything would change. The age of humanity hiding in the shadows was ending. The age of humanity fighting back had begun. In the dense clouds of the Threshold Nebula, 30 human ships waited in silence. Their power signatures were barely above background radiation. Their weapons were charged. Their crews were ready. And somewhere in the distance, a battle fleet approached, completely unaware that they were about to become a message written in fire and blood that would echo across the galaxy. You devastated humanity. Now watch what happens next. War Admiral stood on the bridge of his flagship, the dominant Fang, watching the swirling gases of the Threshold Nebula approach. He was a veteran of 40 campaigns, his purple-scaled skin marked with scars from a dozen battles. In all his years, he had never lost a ship under his command. "Sensors are degrading," his tactical officer reported. "The nebula's radiation is interfering with our systems." "Maintain formation," ordered. "We've passed through this region before, standard procedure." His fleet numbered 52 ships, 12 massive capital vessels surrounded by 40 escort craft. It was enough firepower to level a small planet. They were transporting critical supplies to the front lines and the War Admiral was confident nothing would threaten them in this empty region of space. He was about to learn the cost of confidence. Watched the fleet enter the nebula on his scanner. His fighter was powered down to almost nothing, hanging in space like a dead rock. Around him, 49 other human fighters waited in similar silence. Behind them, the larger warships drifted in the shadows. "They're in the kill zone," his co-pilot whispered. His finger hovered over the power switch. "Wait for the signal." On the command ship Ashes Rising, watched the tactical display. The fleet was now deep in the nebula, their sensors half blind from the radiation. Their formation had loosened slightly as each ship struggled to maintain position in the dense gas. "All ships," he said calmly into the fleet-wide channel, "execute." 30 human warships powered up simultaneously. The nebula lit up with engine signatures as they roared to life. For 3 seconds, the fleet thought they were experiencing sensor ghosts, phantom readings caused by the radiation. Then the missiles arrived. His fighter screamed forward at full thrust, his weapons hot. Around him, the entire strike wing activated as one. They came from every direction, bursting out of the nebula's clouds like vengeful spirits. The escorts never had time to react. Human missiles were different from weapons. They were smaller, faster, and they swarmed. Where a ship might fire 3 heavy torpedoes, a human ship fired 30 light missiles. The point defense systems, designed to track large targets, couldn't keep up with the sheer number of incoming threats. The first 3 escort ships exploded within seconds, then 5 more. The human fighters darted through the confused formation, their plasma cannons tearing into hulls. His targeting computer locked onto an escort vessel. He fired a burst from his main gun, then rolled his fighter 90 degrees and accelerated past the alien ship's shields. Another fighter on his wing launched missiles at the same target. The ship's shields collapsed under the coordinated assault. "That's 7 down," someone shouted over the comm. But they were not helpless. War Admiral recovered from his shock quickly. "All capital ships, focus fire on the coordinates of those engine signatures. Escorts, form defensive screen." The massive capital ships began firing. Their weapons were devastating, beams of purple energy that could slice through a human ship in one hit. The human fleet scattered, using the nebula's clouds for cover. "Echo Squadron hit them from above," ordered. "Delta Group, swing around and target their engines." The human warships moved with a coordination that confused They didn't fight in rigid formations. They flowed like water, never where the enemy expected. When a ship targeted one human vessel, 3 others would strike from different angles. This was warfare born from humanity's bloody history. Tactics developed over thousands of years of conflict, refined through countless battles. They had been the dominant power for so long they had forgotten how to fight an enemy that refused to stand still. Spider took a glancing hit that sent warning lights flashing across his console. "I'm fine," he called to his wing before anyone could ask. He dove toward a capital ship, weaving through its point defense fire. At the last second, he released a spread of missiles and pulled up hard, the G-forces crushing him into his seat. The missiles struck the capital ship's engine section. Explosions rippled across its hull. It didn't destroy the massive vessel, but it wounded it, slowed it down, made it vulnerable. "All wings focus on the damaged capital ship," ordered. 20 fighters converged on the wounded vessel. It tried to turn, tried to bring its weapons to bear, but human fighters were too fast. They swarmed it like insects, each one delivering small wounds that added up. The capital ship's shields failed, then its armor. Finally, its reactor went critical. The explosion was massive, briefly lighting up the entire nebula. "First capital ship down," his voice came through from Earth, monitoring the battle through the fleet's data link. "Enemy count is now 11 capitals and 31 escorts." But the humans were bleeding too. 3 warships had been destroyed, their crews vaporized in an instant. 5 fighters were gone. The odds were still heavily against them. Watched another of his escorts explode and felt something he hadn't experienced in years: fear. These weren't the fought with honor in formation, using similar tactics to these ships fought like madness had taken form. "What are they?" his tactical officer asked, voice shaking. On his screen, a human fighter performed a maneuver that should have been impossible. It used a debris field as cover, then accelerated to attack speed in less than 2 seconds, fired, and was gone before they could return fire. The pilot was treating physics like a suggestion rather than a law. "Sir, I'm detecting. They're human ships," the sensor operator said, disbelief in his voice. "Impossible," said flatly. "We eliminated Earth 8 years ago." But the evidence was in front of him. The ship's energy signatures, the communication frequencies, even the visual scans when they got close enough all confirmed it. Humanity, the species they had classified as extinct, was attacking his fleet. Saw the formation beginning to collapse. They were trying to group together for mutual support, a defensive tactic that made sense against conventional enemies. Against humans who had spent 8 years preparing for this moment, it was a mistake. "All capital ships converge on their cluster, fire everything." The human warships, each one named after something they had destroyed, closed in. The ashes rising, the remembered dead, the Earth's fury, the last hope. They opened fire with every weapon they had. The space between the fleets became a wall of energy and metal. Missiles crossed paths with plasma beams. Ships exploded on both sides. The nebula itself seemed to burn with the intensity of the battle. Saw an escort ship lining up a shot on one of the human capitals. He pushed his fighter into a dive that redlined every safety system. His co-pilot screamed at him to pull up, but he didn't. He fired his entire missile payload at the ship's weapon array. The missiles hit. This main gun exploded instead of firing. The escort ship veered off course, venting atmosphere. Pulled up so hard he almost blacked out, his fighter groaning with the stress. "You're insane," his co-pilot yelled. "I'm alive," corrected, which is more than that ship can say. 2 hours into the battle, the tide had turned. They had numbers and superior technology, but the humans had rage, training, and tactics the aliens couldn't counter. More importantly, every human in that fleet was willing to die if it meant taking ships with them. Though we're not. Once flagship took critical damage, he made a decision. All remaining ships retreat, jump to the rally point immediately. "Sir, we still outnumber them," his tactical officer protested. "And we'll be dead before we can use that advantage," snapped. "These are not normal enemies. They fight like the universe itself has wronged them. Retreat now." The remaining ships began jumping out. 15 ships managed to escape. 37 remained behind, destroyed or too damaged to jump. The human fleet had lost 8 warships and 16 fighters, but they had one. Stood in the command center, watching the tactical display clear as the last ships fled. Around him, his officers cheered. On Earth, in bunkers across the solar system, humans celebrated their first major victory. But wasn't celebrating. He opened a channel to the one ship he had deliberately allowed to escape undamaged, a small escort that had hung back from the main battle. "Vessel," he said clearly, "you are being allowed to leave as a messenger. Go to your high command. Tell them what happened here. Tell them that humanity survived your devastation, and deliver this message." He paused, his face hardening. "You came to our world and called us weak. You killed billions and called it mercy. You left us for dead and moved on to your next conquest. You made a fatal mistake. You assumed that breaking us was the same as destroying us. Now watch what happens next." Leaned closer to the camera. "We're coming for every system you've taken, every colony you've built, every world you've conquered. We're going to dismantle your empire piece by piece. And we won't stop until they are nothing but a warning in history books about what happens when you devastate humanity and assume we'll stay down." He cut the transmission. The ship jumped away, carrying its message of terror. In the capital, 3 days later, the surviving escort ship delivered its recording to the high command. They watched its message in silence. They saw the battle data showing 30 human ships defeating a fleet nearly twice their size. For the first time in their long history of conquest, they felt something new. They felt like prey. 10 years had passed since the sky burned. Stood at the observation window of the rebuilt Seoul Command Center, looking out at a city that refused to die. Buildings rose from the ashes, constructed using hybrid technology that made them stronger than before. The sky was blue again, cleaned by atmospheric processors designed by steam. Earth was healing. But its work was far from over. "Commander, the delegation from the border worlds has arrived," said from behind him. She was older now, lines of stress marking her face, but her eyes were still sharp. "How many systems does this make?" asked. 47. 47 former colonies that have asked to join the coalition. The Terran Coalition. That's what they called it now. What had started as the Remnant, a desperate group of survivors, had become something the galaxy had never seen before. A union of species built on cooperation instead of conquest. The meeting room was filled with alien delegates. Most were species that had been conquered by the generations ago. They looked at with a mixture of hope and fear. Hope that humanity might help them. Fear of what humanity might become. "Thank you for coming," said, his voice calm and measured. "I understand you've all experienced rule. I understand you're afraid of what comes next." A delegate from the species, tall and covered in gray fur, spoke up. "You destroyed the Empire in 2 years. 2 years. A power that dominated the galaxy for centuries. You did it with fury and precision. Now you stand where they stood. How do we know you won't become them?" Nodded. "A fair question. Let me answer it with a story." He brought up a holographic display showing Earth as it had been 10 years ago. Burning, devastated, dying. "They came to my world and killed 90% of my species in 3 days. They left us for dead and called it mercy. We had every reason to become monsters, every reason to spread the same pain we experienced, but we didn't." The hologram shifted, showing images of the war. Human ships fighting fleets, battles across dozens of systems, the systematic dismantling of an empire. "We fought them because they needed to be stopped, not because we enjoyed killing, not because we wanted power, because there are species in this galaxy who deserve to be free." A different delegate, this one from the species with blue skin and 4 arms, spoke hesitantly. "But you have the power now. You have weapons that terrify even the collective. Power corrupts, does it not?" Doctor stood up from her seat beside. She had spent the past 5 years traveling to liberated worlds, offering medical aid. Let me tell you what humanity did with our power. We shared it. She brought up new images. Human doctors working alongside alien physicians. Human engineers teaching freed species how to repair their infrastructure. Human scientists collaborating on research. Every technology we developed, we offered freely. Every medical advancement we shared. We didn't patent our innovations or hoard our knowledge. We gave it away because we remember what it's like to be helpless and alone. Added his voice from the technical delegation. The radiation shields protecting your worlds, human technology, the atmospheric processors cleaning your air, human design, the FTL drives that let you travel 3 times faster than before, we gave you the blueprints. The alien delegates looked at each other, uncertainty in their expressions. They had never encountered anything like this. In their experience, powerful species took what they wanted. They didn't give. Why? The delegate asked simply. Met his eyes. Because we survived extinction to prove something important. Survival alone isn't enough. We had to survive with our humanity intact. We had to prove that pain doesn't have to breed more pain, that the cycle can be broken. He stood and walked to the window looking out at Seoul. I won't lie to you, we're not perfect. We're still angry, still hurt. There are humans who want revenge for revenge's sake, but we're choosing a different path. We're choosing to build instead of destroy. The meeting continued for hours. Questions were asked. Concerns were raised. But in the end, all 47 systems agreed to join the coalition. Not because humanity forced them, because they chose to. That night found in his office staring at reports. You should rest, she said gently. There's too much to do. There's always too much to do, that's why you have people like me. She sat down across from him. We won. The empire is scattered, the coalition is growing, Earth is healing, you can breathe. He looked at her with tired eyes. Can I? Every time I close my eyes, I see soul burning, I see the death counts. 10 billion people, 10 billion. And you saved the 10 million who remained. You gave them a future. You gave all of us a future. Before could respond, an alert sounded, checked her communicator and her expression hardened. The collective, they're sending an envoy. There were the species that had been fighting for decades. They were even more powerful, even more technologically advanced. Humanity had carefully avoided engaging them during the war, focusing only on the. Now, it seemed, they wanted to talk. The envoy arrived in a ship that made human vessels look like toys. It was the size of a city, humming with power that registered on sensors from 1,000,000 kilometers away. The being who emerged called itself Speaker of Depths. It stood 3 meters tall, covered in crystalline armor that shifted colors. You are humanity, it said, its voice like grinding stones. You destroyed the impressive. We liberated worlds the conquered, corrected carefully. We're not interested in replacing one empire with another. Strange, Speaker of Depth said. In our observations, ascending species always seek dominance. It is the way of the galaxy. Then the galaxy needs new ways, said from beside. She had insisted on being present for this meeting, and he was glad for her support. The envoy studied them silently for a long moment. You offer us peace. We offer you a border, said. Our space and yours. Trade, diplomacy, cooperation where it benefits both. But we won't expand into your territory if you don't expand into ours. And if we refuse, if we decide that humanity is a threat that must be eliminated. Standing guard at the back of the room stepped forward. He was a wing commander now, decorated with honors from dozens of battles. Then you'll discover what they learned. Humanity doesn't fight to win. We fight to survive. And we're very, very good at surviving. The threat was clear but delivered without hostility. Simple fact. Speaker of Depths made a sound that might have been laughter. You interest us humans. Very well, we accept your borders. We will observe your coalition with curiosity. If you truly build something different, we may even learn from you." The envoy departed, leaving humanity with something precious: security on their borders. The two greatest threats in the galaxy had been neutralized, one defeated, one negotiated with. 6 months later, Earth hosted its first coalition assembly. Representatives from 47 species gathered in a chamber built from melted warships. The symbolism wasn't subtle. The tools of conquest transformed into foundations for peace. Gave the opening address. He was older now, gray touching his temples. The war years had aged him beyond his time. "We stand here in a chamber made from our enemy's weapons, not as a threat but as a promise. A promise that we will never forget where we came from, never forget what was taken from us, but also a promise that we won't let that pain define us." He looked around at the assembled species, so different from each other, yet united in their desire for something better. 10 years ago, they devastated my world. They thought they ended our story. Instead, they started a new chapter, a chapter where survival isn't enough, where we have to build something worth surviving for. In the center of the chamber stood a monument. 10 billion names carved into black stone pulled from Earth's ruins. The memorial took up an entire wall, names too numerous to count, representing every human who died in the bombardment. Beneath the names, an inscription in every coalition language: "They devastated us. We rose anyway. Never again will extinction be mistaken for victory." Spoke next, representing the medical division. "The coalition offers something simple: healthcare, education, and freedom. We ask nothing in return except that you extend the same to others." Outline the military structure. "The Coalition Defense Force will protect all member worlds. But understand this: we're a defensive force. We fight to protect, not to conquer. Any species caught using coalition weapons for aggression will be expelled." Presented the technological sharing agreement. "All research, all innovations, all discoveries will be shared equally among member species. We rise together or not at all." The Assembly voted unanimously to ratify the Coalition Charter. 47 species, billions of beings, choosing cooperation over competition. That evening, the senior staff gathered privately. And the people who had survived the bunker, who had built the remnant, who had fought the war and won the peace. "Did you ever think we'd make it this far?" asked, nursing a drink. "No," admitted. "In those first days after the bombardment, I thought we might survive a few years at best. I never imagined this." "We changed the galaxy," said softly, "literally rewrote how species interact." "Because we refused to become them," added. "We refused to let pain make us into monsters." Raised his glass. "To the 10 billion, may their memory push us to be better." They all drank to that. Months later, the last remnant of the military attempted one final attack on Earth. It was desperate, poorly planned. A fleet of 20 ships against a planet defended by the combined forces of the coalition. Led the defense personally. The battle, if it could be called that, lasted 14 minutes. Not a single ship survived to retreat. The commander broadcast a final message before his ship exploded. How did you survive?" His response was simple. "You made one critical mistake. You assumed that breaking us was the same as destroying us. Humanity doesn't break, we adapt, we endure, we remember, and we never ever stay down." In the aftermath, stood in Earth's restored forests, breathing air that smelled of life instead of ash. Joined him, and together they watched the sunset. The sky was orange and purple, beautiful in a way that seemed impossible after everything they'd been through. "Do you think it will last?" asked the coalition. "As long as we remember why we built it," replied. "As long as we remember that we're not here to dominate. We're here to prove that survivors can become something better than their trauma." Heavy burden for one species to carry. "We're not carrying it alone anymore. 47 species stand with us now, maybe more soon. Smiled, the devastated humanity thinking they'd eliminated a threat. Instead, they created something the galaxy had never seen. What's that? Hope, real, actual hope that power doesn't have to corrupt, that the strong can choose to protect instead of dominate. Nodded slowly. The galaxy learned a lesson. Devastate humanity if you must, but remember, you're not creating victims. You're creating survivors, and survivors. He paused, watching the sun sink below the horizon. Survivors are the most dangerous force in the universe, especially when they choose mercy over revenge. Across the galaxy, on 47 worlds in the Terran Coalition, beings looked to the stars and saw not threats but possibilities. They saw a future where cooperation mattered more than conquest, where strength was measured by what you protected, not what you destroyed. And on Earth, in a city that had burned and risen from its own ashes, 10 million survivors and their children built something that would echo through history. Not an empire, not a conquest, but a promise. A promise that extinction would never again be mistaken for victory, that humanity would endure, adapt, and rise, always rise. They had devastated humanity and called it mercy. Humanity had survived and called it purpose. And in the space between devastation and purpose, they had found something worth fighting for. Something worth living for. A future